You ever have one of those quiet evenings where you're just kind of drifting, not really sure what to play or watch or do? I had a night like that not too long ago. Just sitting there, flipping through old game folders, looking for something that felt familiar but a little forgotten. And that's when I started thinking about all these games I've loved that never really made much noise. Not the big titles, not the ones everyone posts about, just small, beautiful moments tucked away in corners most people miss. So I thought, maybe you'd like to hear about them too. Just 10 little stories, 10 quiet games that stayed with me long after I stopped playing. Nothing dramatic, just a soft walk through some memories. Come sit with me for a while. Let's talk about the ones that slipped past most people, but still found a place in my heart. You know that feeling when you're walking through a quiet part of town late in the evening? Not quite lonely, but sort of. Distant from everything, like the world's gone soft around the edges. That's what Binary Domain reminds me of. It's not the first game people talk about, and honestly, you might have passed it by without even noticing. But there's something strangely human about it, even though most of it's about robots. I still remember the way the rain looked on broken glass during a firefight, or how a small conversation with a squad mate felt more real than it had any right to. It's not just about action. It's about the way people talk to each other when things get rough, and how trust builds in places you don't expect. The city feels like it's holding a secret. Something cold and beautiful, with metal streets and flickering lights that somehow still feel alive. I didn't expect to care about the story as much as I did, but somewhere between the shouting and the quiet choices, it started to feel personal. Like watching something slowly fall apart while still hoping it holds together. If you ever want to play something that's rough around the edges but full of surprising warmth, this one might stay with you longer than you think.
That's what I'm talking about. Now we can move forward. That bad boy's crazy powerful, but it takes energy to fight.
There was a rainy afternoon where I didn't feel like doing much. Just one of those slow, quiet days where the world feels a little far away. And that's when I stumbled into Singularity. Not because someone recommended it, or because I was looking for something big. I just clicked on it almost by accident, and what I found was this haunting broken place that felt frozen in time. A rusted island soaked in fog and memory, where the past and present kept folding in on each other like old paper. You might have missed this one, but there's something strangely emotional about walking through empty classrooms, still echoing with voices, or opening a door only to see a moment from another era flicker and disappear like it was never real. I remember the first time I rewound a crumbling staircase and watched it rebuild itself, slowly, not just as a mechanic, but as a feeling, like bringing something back that had been lost for too long. There's this quiet ache under everything, like the world's trying to hold on to something it already let go of. It's not about being perfect, it's about how time feels heavy here, how every hallway carries the weight of what used to be, and how the silence sometimes says more than the words. If you're ever in the mood for something different, something a little eerie, a little sad, but quietly beautiful, this one might stay with you in unexpected ways. There was this moment, quiet and a little strange, when I was watching vines slowly wrap around the bones of old machines, and for a second it felt like the world was healing itself after we were gone. That's what Enslaved Odyssey to the West felt like to me. You might have missed this one, but it's one of those stories that sneaks up on you. Not with big twists or loud moments, but with soft, growing connections. It's set in a future that's falling apart, sure, but it's full of color and light in places you wouldn't expect. Old buildings swallowed by trees, sun pouring through broken windows, and two people who don't trust each other slowly learning how to move through all that ruin together. I still remember the way Trip would glance at Monkey from across a gap, waiting for him to leap first, or how sometimes in the middle of chaos, the music would fall quiet. Just wind and footsteps, and that slow feeling that you're not really alone anymore. There's something gentle beneath all the climbing and crashing and fighting, like the story was never really about the world ending, but about finding someone to walk through it with. If you're in the mood for something that feels a little like an old legend told with rust and wildflowers, this one might surprise you. It's soft around the edges, but it stays with you.
Launched. 3 pods remaining.
There was a night I still remember, one of those late, quiet ones where everything feels like it's paused, like the world's holding its breath, and that's when I found myself inside Quantum Break. Not in a flashy way, but more like stepping into a dream where time slips sideways and nothing quite moves the way it should. You might have missed this one, but there's something strangely calming about watching the world freeze and fracture around you, like glass suspended mid-shatter. I remember standing in a hallway where light flickered backward, conversations echoed from the future, and it all felt like walking through someone's broken memory. What stayed with me most wasn't the action or the powers. It was the way it made time feel fragile, like every second could be the last one that made sense. There were moments when I just stood still, watching tiny pieces of debris hang weightless in the air, and it felt almost peaceful, like being inside a thought that hadn't finished forming. And between all the chaos, there was this quiet undercurrent, characters trying to hold on, choices folding into themselves, and the sense that no matter how far you could push the timeline, you still had to face what came next. If you're ever in the mood for something a little strange, a little beautiful, and full of moments that feel like dreams on the edge of falling apart, this one might speak to you in its own quiet way. There's something strange about how some of the angriest stories can still feel quiet in your memory, like they burned bright in the moment but left behind a kind of silence. And that's what X-Men Origins Wolverine felt like to me. Not the movie, not the noise around it. I'm talking about the game, the one you might have skipped without knowing what was hidden inside. It surprised me. You start with claws and chaos, sure, but the deeper you go, the more it starts to feel like a story about someone who's tired of hurting, even though it's all he knows. I still remember walking through dusty labs and forest paths, hearing nothing but breathing and footsteps, and sometimes pausing just to look at the damage left behind, not just in the world, but in the way he carries himself. The healing looks brutal on the outside, but something about it felt heavy, like the body keeps going but the soul's been dragging for years. There's this raw honesty in how the combat feels, messy, fierce, and painful, but between all that, there were quiet moments where the light hit just right, and it reminded me that under all the violence, there's someone trying to remember who he was before everything fell apart. If you're ever in the mood for something that looks rough but holds something strangely thoughtful underneath, this one might catch you off guard in the best kind of way. There was a quiet evening when I didn't want anything loud, just something slow, something that would sit with me for a while, and that's when I found A Plague Tale: Innocence. You might have passed over this one, but there's something delicate in the way it tells its story, not with big battles or bright lights, but with two small voices trying to stay close in a world that keeps falling apart around them. I still remember walking through golden fields just before the sky turned gray, holding Hugo's hand and hearing the soft rustle of grass and fear between them. The world feels sick and beautiful at the same time, candles burning in cold stone churches, whispering wind through empty homes, rats swarming like shadows that don't want to be seen. But beneath all of that, what stayed with me were the little moments. The way Amicia would glance at her brother when he was scared, or how their bond felt real even when the world around them didn't make sense anymore. It's not just about survival, it's about carrying someone with you when they're too small to understand why everything hurts and doing it anyway. If you've ever wanted to play something that feels like a story told in hushed voices under candlelight, this one might quietly stay in your heart long after it ends.
Got out.
So we can leave now, right?
If they don't find us again.
But you have your sling. You can protect us.
It's not that easy, Hugo.
There was this one evening, the kind where the city outside your window feels a little too quiet, like it's holding something back. And that's when I remembered Sleeping Dogs. You might have missed this one, but it's the kind of story that pulls you in slow, not with flash, but with rhythm. The glow of neon signs in the rain, the hum of old alleyways, and the soft sadness in a man's voice when he's torn between who he is and who he's pretending to be. Walking through that version of Hong Kong felt like moving through a memory that wasn't mine but still felt personal, like stepping into someone's life right in the middle of it. There were moments where the city felt alive in a quiet way, folding dumplings with an old vendor, drifting through streets on a motorbike as music played faintly in the background, or just standing on a rooftop, watching lights blink across the harbor. What surprised me most wasn't the fights or the chases. It was the weight of silence after a mission ended, or how a character's face would say more than the dialogue ever did. It's a story about loyalty and loss, but underneath all that, it's about feeling caught between two worlds and trying not to lose yourself in either. If you've ever looked at a city and felt like it was hiding a story just under the surface, this one might be something quietly special for you too. There was a dusty afternoon where I just wanted to disappear into a story. Something with sunlight, old ghosts, and the kind of voice that sounds like it's been telling tales forever. And that's when I wandered into Call of Juarez, Gunslinger. You might have skipped this one, but it feels like listening to your grandfather spin a story he's told 100 times, only this time it hits different, like there's truth hiding under the parts that don't quite add up. The world itself feels like a memory caught between fact and legend, where colors bloom a little brighter than they should, and every corner of the desert carries the echo of a name you might have heard once in a book. I remember riding through old canyons as the sky shifted from gold to violet, the narrator's voice guiding me like a song, sometimes sure, sometimes stumbling, like he was making it up just to see if you'd follow. What stood out wasn't the gunfights or the duels, though they had their weight, but the feeling of being wrapped in someone's story, told with warmth, swagger, and a little sadness. It's about chasing revenge, yeah, but also chasing meaning in a life that feels like it's already passed by. If you've ever wanted to sit with someone who remembers the West not the way it was, but the way it felt, this one might give you that. A quiet, thoughtful ride through a fading legend that still lingers just under the dust. There was this quiet evening where everything just felt a little too still, like I needed to step into a world that wasn't mine. And somehow, I found myself walking the black and white streets of occupied Paris in the Sabotur. You might not know this one, but it stays with me in a strange way, like an old photo tucked in the back of a drawer. At first, everything feels drained, not just of color, but of hope. The city swallowed in shadows and silence, and then slowly, as you begin to fight back, you start to see it return. Bits of light, little splashes of color, soft glows in windows that hadn't lit up in years. It's not just the style that gets to you, though it's beautiful in its own quiet way. It's the feeling of breathing life back into something broken. I remember climbing rooftops with the wind in my ears and the sound of distant music echoing through alleyways, feeling like I was helping the city remember itself. You play as Sean, an Irish driver turned resistance fighter. But honestly, it's less about who he is and more about how it feels to step into his shoes. A mix of anger, longing, and that strange kind of courage that comes from having nothing left to lose. The world doesn't beg for attention. It just waits patiently for you to notice it. The way a certain cafe glows after liberation, or how the piano plays again when the soldiers are gone. If you're in the mood for something quiet but brave, something that makes you feel like your actions slowly bring light back to a dim corner of the world, the Saboteur might just be that quiet surprise you didn't know you needed. There was a rainy day once, one of those where the sky feels heavy and the hours stretch a little too long, and I remember thinking, I just want to play something that doesn't care about rules, something that lets me be loud without being serious. That's when I stumbled back into Bulletstorm, and even now, it makes me smile in a way that's hard to explain. You might have missed this one. It's wild, ridiculous, and strangely beautiful in how unashamed it is. But under all that chaos, there's a rhythm to it, a kind of strange poetry in the way you move and fight. I remember walking through alien ruins that glowed with soft, unnatural light. Everything oversized, almost dreamlike, and then suddenly being flung into a firefight where everything felt like it was part of a dance. Not just the gunplay, but the timing, the flow, the way you'd slide, kick, whip someone into the air and watch the world slow down, just enough for it to feel almost graceful. And weirdly, even with all the madness, I kept noticing how the skies looked. Soft clouds bending around massive structures, or that orange sunset on the edge of the broken city, where for a moment, everything felt calm. What surprised me was how much fun it was just being in that world. Not because it was peaceful, but because it gave you space to play in a way that felt free, like nobody was watching, and you could just go a little wild. It's messy, sure, but if you ever feel stuck or tired and you just want something that lets you laugh and move without overthinking, Bulletstorm might be the unexpected little storm that clears your head.
Merry birthday, Death Wish!
Thanks for being here with me. It really means a lot. Sometimes just talking through memories like these, like the ones from 10 underrated games I loved that you probably missed, helps me slow down and remember why I fell in love with games in the first place. Quiet little moments, strange surprises, things that stayed with me longer than I expected. I hope a few of them brought back something for you too. or maybe even pointed you towards something new. If you feel like sharing a game that meant something to you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you ever feel like coming back, you're always welcome here. No pressure, no rush. Just whenever you feel like sitting down and listening again. Until then, take care of yourself. I'll be right here.